Centuries of knowledge survived without a single written word. Ancient societies mastered memory engineering, a sophisticated cognitive technology that built entire cultures long before writing. By the end of this exploration, you will see human memory not as a simple recall tool, but as a system you can actively design and control. How did a medieval poet carry an entire legal code in their head? And what does a cathedral have in common with a supercomputer? We will uncover the ingenious methods used to encode information into minds, rituals, and stone, revealing why these ancient techniques hold urgent lessons for our digital age. What forgotten skill might our own brains still be waiting to rediscover? The flickering firelight does more than just cast shadows on the wall. It illuminates the first and most powerful hard drive humanity ever built, the living library of the human voice. In a world without paper, the mind of the storyteller was the ultimate archive. Picture not just a bard entertaining a crowd, but a Gaelic senchai, a keeper of tradition, seated by the hearth. Their recitation is not a casual tale, it is a solemn act of cultural preservation. Every rhythmic line, every repeated epithet like swift-footed Achilles or wine-dark sea, carries a precise payload of information. This is the essence of the oral tradition, the foundational pillar of memory engineering. It was never about simply remembering a story. It was about encoding an entire operating system for a society into a form the brain could not forget. This method had a technical name, oral formulaic composition. Think of it as the cognitive scaffolding of the ancient world. Instead of trying to memorize a sprawling epic word for word as a random string of text, which our brains are terrible at, the storyteller worked with a toolkit of prefabricated parts. Standardized descriptions of heroes, ships, and feasts, recurring metrical patterns in the poetry, and familiar narrative structures all acted as mnemonic slots. The performer wasn't reciting a frozen text, they were assembling a known narrative from these reliable, memorized components, much like a musician improvises within the chord progression of a song. This is how the Homeric epics, tales like the Iliad and the Odyssey, could be transmitted orally for centuries, possibly 500 years or more, before being written down. The same engineering preserved the vast Vedic hymns of India, intricate philosophical and ritual texts passed from teacher to student with meticulous accuracy across generations. The information stored in these living libraries was profound. Woven into the epic poems were the legal precedents of a people, the genealogies that determined land rights and social standing, the historical chronicles of migrations and battles, and the technical knowledge of navigation, medicine, and ethics. The fidelity of this system was enforced by its social architecture. The storyteller, the bard, the senchai, was not merely an entertainer. They were a revered custodian, a senior historian, and often a high-status figure close to chieftains and kings. Their role was sacred. To alter the narrative was not an artistic choice, it was an act of cultural sabotage, a betrayal of the ancestors and the identity of the people. The community itself was the quality control, listening for the familiar formulas, the correct genealogies, the proper sequence of events. This was a dynamic, performative archive, constantly rehearsed and renewed with each telling, yet held to a rigid standard of accuracy. It was knowledge made alive, breathed into the community space, binding listeners to their past with every recited line. This vibrant, auditory world of memory sets the stage for a fascinating evolution. What happens when a society begins to translate these intricate mental structures into something you can see and touch, into the very landscape and architecture that surrounds them? The human mind is a natural cartographer, instinctively mapping the spaces we inhabit. It was this innate ability that ancient engineers harnessed to construct the most sophisticated mental technology of the pre-literate world, the memory palace. The technique, known as the method of loci, did not treat memory as a list to be memorized, but as a landscape to be navigated. Its legendary origin points to a moment of profound tragedy and discovery in ancient Greece. The poet Simonides was said to be the sole survivor of a catastrophic building collapse during a banquet. When asked to identify the guests for their families, he realized he could recall each person based on where they had been sitting around the table. From this harrowing event, a universal principle was extracted. Our memory for places is extraordinarily strong and can be used as a scaffold to hold anything we wish to remember. Roman senators adopted it to deliver hours-long speeches without notes, and medieval monks perfected it to hold entire books of scripture in their minds. The process was methodical, almost like a mental craft. First, you select a real place you know intimately, the rooms of your home, the path through your village, the layout of a cathedral. This becomes your palace, a fixed architectural blueprint in your imagination. Second, you transform the information you need to remember into a vivid, often bizarre mental image. To remember the concept of charity, you might picture a glowing loaf of bread on your doorstep. For a historical date, you could imagine a specific knight standing in your hallway. The more striking and sensory the image, the better it sticks. Third, you take a mental walk, depositing each image at a specific station or locus along your familiar route. The first concept goes by the front door, the second on the staircase, the third in the kitchen window. When you need to recall the information, you simply retrace your steps in your mind, collecting the images you left behind. This was not a secret trick, it was formalized scholarship. Textbooks like the Rhetorica ad Hernium, studied for centuries, laid out these rules explicitly. The memory palace transformed the fluid, auditory knowledge of the oral tradition into something solid and spatial. It allowed a single scholar to mentally archive complex philosophical arguments, legal codes, or medicinal recipes by distributing them across a mental city they built themselves. This was the ultimate act of cognitive engineering, proving that memory could be designed, structured, and expanded through deliberate architecture. But what if this principle could be inverted? If the mind could be trained to navigate imaginary buildings to store knowledge, could real, physical buildings be designed to guide the mind toward sacred truths? This architectural genius was not confined to the mind. It was poured into stone, etched across horizons, and raised toward the heavens. Societies began to construct colossal memory palaces in the physical world, turning their entire environment into a permanent, three-dimensional archive. A Gothic cathedral is far more than a place of worship. Walk through its nave, and you are literally walking through a built theology. Every element is a deliberate mnemonic. The floor plan, shaped like a cross, maps the story of sacrifice. The soaring height pulls your gaze upward, a physical metaphor for spiritual aspiration. And then there are the walls, the windows, the very fabric of the building, all dense with stored information. For a medieval populace where few could read the written word, these structures were their living books. The stained glass windows were not merely decorative. They were luminous comic strips, vividly depicting biblical parables, the lives of saints, and complex moral lessons in a cascade of colored light. Each sculpted figure in the portal, each carved capital atop a column, served as a fixed communal memory slot, just like a locus in a mental palace, but one shared by an entire city. This was knowledge externalized and democratized, accessible to all who entered and looked. This principle extends far beyond the medieval era and into deep prehistory. Consider the silent, staggering scale of the pyramids at Giza. Their precise alignment with celestial bodies was not an accident of ambition. It was a deliberate anchoring of cosmic knowledge into the bedrock of the earth, a permanent stone calendar and a map of the heavens. Similarly, the vast geoglyphs of the Nazca lines in Peru, visible only from the sky, transformed the desert floor into a gigantic ritual landscape. These were not meant for daily viewing, but as permanent inscriptions of mythological and astronomical knowledge onto the land itself, a sacred text written at a geographic scale for deities or ancestors to read. These monuments functioned as the ultimate hard drives, immune to the decay of parchment or the fallibility of human recall. They stored the core operating system of a civilization, its understanding of time, its relationship with the gods, and its social order in a format designed to last millennia. But a storage device, no matter how grand, is inert without a way to access its data. A cathedral full of stories is just a museum unless those stories are activated, unless the knowledge stored in stone is brought to life in the minds of the people. This is where ritual enters the system, not as mere ceremony, but as the essential software that runs the architectural program. The cyclical processions through the cathedral on holy days, the chanting that echoed off those carved walls, the seasonal festivals held at a stone circle aligned with the solstice sunrise, all these were performative acts of recall. They were the ritualized walk through the communal memory palace, touching each station, reinforcing each story, and renewing the shared knowledge encoded in the landscape. The monument held the information, but the ritual was the replay button, ensuring the data was never just stored but continually lived. This seamless fusion of place, symbol, and performance created a self-sustaining cultural memory loop. Yet for all their power, these external systems, from epic poems to mountain-sized monuments, shared a common vulnerability. They were profoundly local, tied to specific places, specific voices, and specific communities. What happens when a society's scale explodes, when trade routes stretch for thousands of miles, bureaucracies swell, and transactions become too numerous for any bard to sing or any ritual to encompass? The very success of these memory cultures created a crisis that demanded a new, more radical form of engineering. The grandest cathedral or the most epic poem remained a dormant archive until it was activated. This activation came not through reading, but through living repetition, through the precise, choreographed movement of bodies in space. Ritual was the kinetic engine of ancient memory, the software that ran the cultural program encoded in story and stone. It transformed passive knowledge into an embodied communal experience. This is the kinesthetic code, where information is stored not in the mind alone, but in the muscles, the voice, and the shared rhythm of a group. Every step in a ceremonial dance, every cadence in a seasonal chant, every symbolic gesture in a rite of passage served as a powerful mnemonic trigger. The body itself became a living reference book. A profound example of this exists in the traditions of Aboriginal Australians with the concept of songlines. These are not merely songs, but intricate acoustic maps of the entire continent. By singing the specific sequences of a songline, an individual recalls the epic journeys of ancestral creator beings. Each verse describes landmarks, water sources, and animal behaviors, effectively encoding vast topographic and survival knowledge into a melodic, memorized sequence. To sing the song is to navigate the land, and to walk the land is to recall the song. It is a perfect fusion of myth, geography, and practical wayfinding, all held in the body through rhythm and breath. Medieval Europe operated on a similar, though more localized, principle. For a population that could not read Latin scripture, the weekly Mass was a full sensory rehearsal of core beliefs. But this was amplified spectacularly by the liturgical drama and mystery plays performed in town squares. Guilds of craftsmen would stage elaborate, often year-long cycles depicting stories from creation to the Last Judgment. A baker might play the role of Noah, a carpenter might build the ark on a wagon that rolled through the streets. Citizens weren't just watching a story, they were witnessing their neighbors physically embody sacred history. The emotional impact of seeing, hearing, and even smelling the theatrical smoke made theological concepts unforgettable. This was knowledge transmitted through spectacle and empathy, creating a shared emotional memory that bound the community. The resilience of this system was its genius. A written scroll could burn, a single scholar with a memory palace could pass, but a ritual, a dance, a song cycle practiced by an entire community was far harder to erase. It was distributed across hundreds of bodies and reinforced with each performance. The knowledge became instinctual, a part of cultural muscle memory. To know how to properly conduct a harvest festival was to remember the agricultural calendar. To perform a coming-of-age ceremony was to internalize the social responsibilities of adulthood. This embodied practice ensured that vital information was not just recalled intellectually, but lived experientially, generation after generation. It created a transmission network of profound durability, one that could withstand tremendous hardship because it was woven into the very fabric of daily and seasonal life. Yet, for all their distributed strength, these ancient systems of memory, oral, architectural, and ritual, all shared a fundamental constraint. They were brilliant at preserving a core cultural canon, the great stories, laws, and rites that defined a people. But they struggled with the new, the specific, and the transactional. They were not designed for the rapid, precise exchange of novel information across great distances. What happens when memory itself must become a commodity, when you need to record not a timeless myth, but a shipment of grain, a debt owed, or the terms of a treaty between strangers who share no songs? This pressure point, born from the very success of growing societies, would force the human mind to engineer its most revolutionary and disruptive tool, one that would ultimately externalize memory completely. The pressure of commerce and bureaucracy created a cognitive bottleneck, a demand for a new kind of record that was portable, precise, and impersonal. But in the quiet heart of the medieval world, another tradition was reaching its zenith, one that refined memory into a sacred art form. The monastery was not an escape from the world of memory engineering, it was its highest temple. Within the cloistered walls and silent scriptoria, the classical techniques of the memory palace were not lost, they were baptized. Monks transformed these ancient tools from instruments of secular oration into architectures for divine contemplation. Their goal was audacious: to memorize the entire Psalter, all 150 psalms, along with vast swaths of scripture, liturgical calendars, and dense theological commentaries. This was not rote repetition, it was a sophisticated spiritual technology. Scholars like Mary Carruthers have shown us that monastic meditation was an active, constructive process. A monk would build intricate mental structures, often imagined as grids, wheels, or ladders, to organize sacred knowledge. He might associate a verse from the Song of Songs with the image of a specific saint in a particular niche of his mental cathedral, or map the virtues and vices onto a symbolic tree in his mind's garden. Each vivid, emotionally resonant image served as a hook for a theological concept, making abstract ideas tangible and unforgettable. The monastery itself was designed as the ultimate physical aid to this mental work. Its very layout was a memory palace in stone. The cloister garden, with its ordered paths and symbolic plants, represented the structured paradise of the soul. Frescoes on the walls depicted biblical scenes and the lives of martyrs, providing a gallery of mnemonic images. Most profoundly, the Liturgy of the Hours, the cycle of prayers recited at 8 specific times throughout the day and night, structured time itself as a tool for recall. This rhythmic, daily rehearsal of psalms and readings was the kinetic ritual that constantly walked the monk through the mental architecture he had built. Every chant at matins, every prayer at vespers reinforced the pathways of memory, binding the sacred texts to the rhythm of the sun and the breath of the body. This was memory engineering with a transcendent purpose. It shifted the classical goal from winning a legal case or delivering a speech to achieving a contemplative union with the divine. Knowledge was not for public display, but for private transformation, a way to internalize the Word of God so completely that it reshaped the soul from within. The monk, in the silence of his cell, was navigating the most important palace of all, the one constructed to house eternity. Yet, even as this spiritual system reached its peak, a parallel revolution was unfolding that would change the very substance of memory. It began not with parchment, but with something far more humble, a simple knot in a cord or a notch on a stick. Yet the human drive to record pressed beyond the mind and into the hand, seeking a memory one could hold. Before ink touched parchment, societies were encoding complex data into the simplest of materials, turning string, wood, and shell into sophisticated physical databases. These were not primitive attempts at writing, but parallel inventions, complete memory systems in their own right. Consider the Quipu, the remarkable knotted cord device of the Inca Empire. To the untrained eye, it might look like a tangled collection of colorful strings, but to a Quipu, a trained knot record keeper, it was a dynamic ledger, a census report, and perhaps even a historical chronicle. Information was stored in multiple dimensions: the type of knot, its specific placement along a cord, the color and material of the cord itself, and the spatial relationship of pendant cords to a main strand. This allowed for the recording of vast numerical data, tracking tributes, inventorying storehouses, and recording populations across an empire that spanned mountains and deserts. It was a portable, tactile spreadsheet, enabling administrators to manage a realm without a single written word. In medieval Europe, a similar principle of tangible verification flourished with the humble tally stick. When a transaction occurred, say a loan of grain, a wooden stick was notched with marks representing the amount. The stick was then split lengthwise, creating two unique, matching halves. The lender kept one half, the debtor the other. This simple act created an unforgeable record. When the debt came due, the two pieces could be rejoined, the notches aligning perfectly to prove the agreement. These sticks were so trusted they became a form of currency themselves, circulating as proof of debt owed by the crown or a merchant. They transformed abstract obligations into physical objects that could be held, stored, and verified by touch, a brilliant solution for a largely non-literate society engaged in complex commerce. Across the Atlantic, the indigenous nations of the northeastern woodlands crafted wampum, cylindrical beads made from quahog and whelk shells, woven into intricate belts and strings. While often misunderstood as mere decoration or money, wampum belts functioned as dense mnemonic devices for recording treaties, laws, and historical narratives. The arrangement of purple and white beads in specific patterns, the imagery woven into the belt, served as a guide for a trained speaker. Holding the belt, the speaker would use its design to prompt the recitation of the exact terms of an agreement or the episodes of a shared story. The belt itself did not contain the text. It was the key that unlocked the precise oral performance, binding the physical artifact to the living memory of the community in a pact of mutual reinforcement. These physical mnemonics represent a crucial evolutionary step in memory engineering. They externalized information in a stable, portable form that could be verified, transferred, and even calculated with, like an ancient abacus. They moved memory from a purely internal, biological process into the shared, tangible world of objects, creating a bridge between the mind's palace and the permanent mark. But this bridge had a limit. The information on a tally stick or a quipu, however complex, still required a trained human mind to interpret its meaning. The notches and knots were prompts, not a standalone language. This reliance on a living interpreter meant the system was only as durable as the lineage of its keepers. What breakthrough finally severed the tether between the record and the rememberer, creating a symbol that could speak for itself across generations to anyone who learned its code? The answer lies not in a grand invention, but in the slow, revolutionary act of making a mark that meant one thing, and one thing only: The power of a name, when placed in a precise sequence, could hold an entire universe of time. For countless societies, the most vital map was not of land, but of lineage, a living chain of names that connected the present directly to the mythical past. Genealogies and king lists were far more than family trees. They were the fundamental architecture of historical memory, the scaffolding upon which a people hung their identity, their laws, and their right to the land. In a world without written calendars or history books, these recited lists became the official timeline. A master genealogist in medieval Iceland, known as a lawspeaker, could stand at the annual Althing assembly and recite not only the legal code from memory, but also the lineages of the major families, tracing their settlement rights back to the original Norse explorers. Each name in that chain was a narrative peg. The recitation might pause at a particular ancestor to recount a great battle they fought, a treaty they sealed, or a ship they sailed, effectively embedding the key events of history within the family line itself. This practice was mirrored across the globe. In West African traditions, griots held the prestigious and solemn duty of memorizing genealogies that stretched back dozens, sometimes hundreds of generations. To hear a griot recite a lineage was to hear the history of a kingdom unfold, with each name evoking stories of migration, alliance, conquest, and wisdom. The genealogy was a legitimizing document spoken aloud, proving a ruler's divine or heroic descent, and thus their right to govern. It was memory engineered for power and continuity. Even the Anglo-Saxon Chronicle, one of the foundational documents of English history, began not as ink on parchment, but as an oral tradition of recording kings and the notable events of their reigns. These lists served a profound cognitive function. They mapped the abstract river of time into a solid, memorable path. Memorizing a genealogy was a way to walk that path, to touch each generation like a station in a vast temporal memory palace. It connected every individual in the community to a shared origin story, justifying social structures, land claims, and political authority through the undeniable weight of the past. This was memory engineered not just for preservation, but for active governance and social cohesion. The lineage was the ultimate source code for a culture's operating system. Yet, for all their power, these intricate systems of oral and ritual memory faced an ultimate test, a force that would not just supplement them, but fundamentally reshape the human relationship with knowledge itself. What happens when memory finally steps outside the mind and the ritual, and becomes fixed on a surface where it can be seen, copied, and contested by anyone forever? The rhythm of a chant or the melody of a ballad did more than stir the soul. It structured thought itself. Ancient societies discovered that information set to music became nearly indelible, a cognitive shortcut that turned complex data into an automatic, singable sequence. This was memory engineering at its most elegant, using the predictable patterns of rhythm and pitch to create a scaffold for the mind. The regular beat of a drum or the rising and falling contour of a melody provides a powerful mnemonic framework, a series of mental slots where each piece of information has a designated place in time. Our brains are wired to detect and anticipate patterns, and music exploits this wiring perfectly, making recall feel less like searching a cluttered attic and more like following a well-lit path. This principle powered some of the most demanding memory tasks of the ancient world. In early medieval Ireland, the intricate legal system known as the Brehon laws was preserved not in law books but in the minds of poetic jurists. These laws, covering everything from property disputes to personal injury, were composed in strict poetic meter. A legal scholar would learn the entire code by mastering these rhythmic verses, where the cadence itself helped lock the precise wording and sequence of statutes into place. A mistake in rhythm would signal a mistake in the law. This was not an artistic flourish, it was a practical filing system, using the music of language to ensure fidelity across generations. The same technique echoed in the solemn halls of monasteries with Gregorian chant. The monophonic, unaccompanied melodies of the liturgy were designed for more than worship. They were mnemonic devices for sacred texts. The melodic modes helped singers remember long passages of Latin psalmody, the rise and fall of the notes acting as a guide through the textual landscape. Even in the bustling medieval village, history and news traveled through folk ballads. The story of a local conflict, a noble's deeds, or a tragic event was set to a familiar, repetitive tune, allowing the tale to be easily learned, repeated, and carried from town to town by minstrels. We still use this ancient cognitive hack today, often without realizing it. The alphabet song that teaches children their ABCs is a direct descendant of this tradition, using a simple melody to impose order on 26 random symbols. Multiplication tables set to a catchy tune become effortless to recall. This works because music engages the brain in a multisensory symphony, activating areas involved in hearing, movement, emotion, and pattern recognition simultaneously. This creates a richer, more interconnected memory trace, making the information far more resistant to being forgotten. Ancient cultures, through trial and observation, had intuitively grasped a fundamental truth of cognitive science: melody is a glue for memory. By composing their most vital knowledge into song, they engineered it to survive. Yet, as powerful as these auditory and rhythmic systems were, they shared a common vulnerability with all living traditions. They required a continuous chain of human voices. If the singers fell silent, the song could be lost forever. This inherent fragility would set the stage for the most disruptive innovation in the history of memory, one that sought to break the chain of human transmission altogether. Our ancestors were master engineers of the mind long before we had the science to explain why their designs worked. The effectiveness of a memory palace or a rhythmic chant is not mystical luck. It is a direct exploitation of the brain's fundamental wiring. Modern neuroscience reveals that these ancient techniques were, in fact, highly optimized cognitive software. Take the method of loci, the foundation of the memory palace. Its power stems directly from the spatial mapping function of a seahorse-shaped region deep in the brain called the hippocampus. This structure is our internal GPS. It creates and navigates mental maps of our physical surroundings. When you visualize walking through your childhood home, you are activating this precise neural circuitry. By placing memories along a familiar route, you are hijacking this powerful, evolved system for spatial navigation and repurposing it for general information storage. You are literally giving abstract ideas a place to live inside the brain's strongest mapping tool. This is why spatial memory feels so effortless and enduring compared to trying to memorize a random list. The ancients discovered through practice what we now confirm with brain scans, that the mind thinks best in places. This principle extends to the vivid, often bizarre imagery used to populate those mental palaces. Why picture a glowing loaf of bread to remember charity, or a knight in armor to recall a date? This leverages what cognitive scientists call the bizarreness effect and dual coding theory. Our brains are novelty detectors, wired to pay extra attention to and remember things that are unusual, emotional, or visually striking. A mundane image fades, but a surprising or absurd one creates a stronger, more distinctive memory trace. Furthermore, dual coding theory shows that information stored in two formats, say verbally as the word charity and visually as that glowing loaf, creates two interconnected memory pathways. If one path fades, the other can often restore it, making the memory far more resilient. The medieval monk associating a theological concept with a vivid image of a saint was not being fanciful. He was performing precise cognitive engineering, creating a multisensory anchor for an abstract idea. The rhythmic, repetitive nature of ritual and oral poetry taps into another set of deep cognitive processes. The steady beat of a chant or the predictable meter of an epic poem provides a temporal scaffold, a structure that reduces cognitive load. It is easier for the brain to sequence information when it is locked into a rhythmic pattern, much like it is easier to remember the lyrics of a song than a paragraph of prose. This repetition directly strengthens memories through synaptic plasticity, the brain's ability to rewire itself. Each rehearsal of a ritual or recitation of a verse physically strengthens the neural connections holding that information, making the pathway faster and more automatic. This is procedural memory in action, the same system that allows you to ride a bike without thinking. The community singing a seasonal song was not just celebrating, they were collectively reinforcing a vital neural circuit, etching their calendar and their myths into the very biology of their shared mind. Perhaps the most profound cognitive tool was narrative itself. Our brains are not designed to remember isolated facts, they are designed to remember stories. A story provides context, causality, and emotion, all of which create a richer, more interconnected memory engram, a physical change in the brain representing the memory. A list of kings is forgettable, but the story of a king's betrayal, his exile, and his triumphant return creates an emotional journey that the brain latches onto. The genealogies recited by griots or law speakers were effective precisely because each name was a story prompt, a gateway to a narrative filled with conflict, discovery, or hardship. Emotion acts as a highlighter for the brain, marking certain memories as important and worthy of long-term storage. The ancient engineers understood this intuitively, wrapping their most vital data in the compelling, emotional package of a saga. This modern validation transforms our view of these traditions. They were not primitive mnemonics, they were sophisticated systems reverse-engineered from the human brain itself, the original and most profound hardware they had to work with. This realization leads to a pressing contemporary question. If these systems were so brilliantly effective, optimized over millennia, what did we lose when we replaced them? That profound cognitive partnership between mind and method was about to be disrupted by its own greatest invention. The transition from an oral to a literate world, accelerated by the medieval manuscript, was not a clean upgrade. It was a seismic trade-off, a fundamental renegotiation of what it meant to know something. Writing offered a miraculous new permanence. A law carved in stone or copied onto vellum could outlive empires. It allowed for a precision oral recitation could rarely guarantee, freezing a specific version of a text for all to see and compare. Most revolutionary of all, it externalized memory. Knowledge was no longer the sole property of the trained bard, the elder, or the monastic scholar. It could be stored on a shelf, sent across continents, and accessed by anyone who learned the code of letters. This began the slow democratization of information, shifting power away from exclusive guilds of memorizers. Yet with every gain came a subtle, profound loss. The deep, internalized, performative knowledge of the oral culture began to fade. When a legal code is in a book, you no longer need to compose it into perfect poetic meter and carry it within you. The very capacity for that kind of vast architectural memorization can atrophy from disuse. The personal, contextual, fluid nature of the oral tradition, where a story might be adapted slightly for a specific audience while keeping its core truth, gave way to the fixed, authoritative text. The version on the page became the official version, and all others became suspect. This anxiety about the trade-off is ancient. Centuries before the medieval scriptorium, the philosopher Plato, through the voice of Socrates in his dialogue Phaedrus, issued a stark warning about this new technology. He argued that writing would create forgetfulness in the souls of those who learn it. They will stop exercising their memory because they trust the external marks, he cautioned, calling writing not a tool for true memory, but merely for reminder. For Plato, true wisdom was alive, a living discourse held in a trained mind. The written word was a static picture of that wisdom, a shadow that risked being mistaken for the thing itself. This was the core tension, the shift from knowing by heart to knowing by reference. The medieval world felt this tension deeply. A beautifully illuminated gospel book was a sacred object, but the church still required its clergy to know vast portions of scripture by heart, to have it woven into the fabric of their consciousness through the rhythmic prayer of the liturgy. The written text supported the living memory. It did not yet replace it. This historical moment holds a crucial mirror to our own relationship with technology. We have externalized memory on a scale Plato could never have imagined, from the printing press to the smartphone in our pocket. The convenience is undeniable, granting us access to more information than any medieval library could hold. But we must ask ourselves, in this great bargain, what cognitive muscles have we allowed to weaken? Have we, in trusting the cloud, made our own internal landscapes a little less vast? The story of how we remember is never just about the past. It is a lens for understanding what we are becoming. A skald's verse was not mere entertainment. It was the currency of immortality in the Viking world. In the great halls of medieval Scandinavia, illuminated by fire and the scent of roasting meat, the poet-historian known as the Skald held a position of immense prestige and solemn duty. These were the memory engineers of a warrior aristocratic culture, tasked with preserving the entire record of a people, their gods, their kings, and their epic voyages, entirely within the intricate architecture of poetry. Their primary tool was a demanding poetic form called drottfeet, the courtly meter. Composing in drottfeet was a high-status skill akin to mastering a complex martial art. It required strict patterns of alliteration where certain sounds linked lines together, a precise syllable count, and a system of internal rhyme that created a dense, interlocking sonic structure. This rigid framework was not arbitrary artistic constraint, it was mnemonic engineering. The predictable rhythm and sound patterns acted as a cognitive scaffold, making the verses far easier to memorize and transmit accurately across generations. A flaw in the meter would be heard immediately by a trained audience, signaling a break in the sacred chain of transmission. Within this structured form, the Skalds employed their most ingenious device, the kenning. A kenning is a metaphorical compound phrase that replaces a simple noun. The sea becomes the whale road, blood becomes battle sweat. A sword is the flame of the wound. These are not just flowery descriptions, they are compressed, memorable units of meaning. Each kenning is a tiny puzzle, a two-part metaphor that requires the listener to actively unpack its meaning. This act of decoding engages the mind more deeply than a plain word ever could, forging a stronger memory trace. To hear whale road is to picture the vast, traversable expanse of the ocean in a way the word sea alone does not convey. This linguistic compression allowed Skalds to pack immense descriptive power and cultural knowledge into a tight poetic line, ensuring each verse was dense with meaning and built for recall. The social context of this performance was its reinforcement loop. Skalds recited their poems at feasts, gatherings, and before kings, often as part of a reward for their patronage. The hall itself, filled with the very warriors and leaders whose deeds were being celebrated or whose ancestors were being honored, served as a living validators. The community listened for the correct genealogies, the proper accounts of battles, and the accurate depiction of legendary heroes. If the Skald erred, someone in that hall would know. This constant public rehearsal in a high-stakes social setting ensured the knowledge was not only preserved but constantly polished and verified. It made memory a collective, performative act where fame and legacy literally depended on its flawless transmission. The great Icelandic sagas, written down centuries later, are the direct descendants of this vibrant oral tradition. Works like Enjol's Saga or Egil's Saga retain the crisp, dialogue-driven narrative style and the concern with honor, fate, and personal legacy that were hallmarks of the Scaldic art. They are frozen echoes of a world where history lived in the breath of the poet, where the past was not read, but heard and felt in the resonant cadences of a well-crafted verse. This case study reveals memory engineering not as a peripheral art, but as the very core of a culture's identity machine. Yet, this brilliant system, for all its strength, was ultimately confined by geography and the fragility of human life. A Scald's voice could only reach as far as the hall's walls would carry it. What happens when a culture's memory needs to travel across oceans and centuries, carried not by a single voice but by 1,000 anonymous hands? The answer would be found in the quiet, relentless scratching of a pen in a darkened room. A continent's entire memory was held in a melody. In the vast, ancient landscapes of Australia, Aboriginal cultures engineered perhaps the most sophisticated and holistic memory system ever devised, the Songlines. These are not mere songs or stories. They are living, acoustic maps that encode the entire knowledge system of a people. A songline traces the epic journeys of ancestral creator beings from the dreaming, the foundational era when the world was shaped. As these beings traveled, singing the world into existence, their actions formed the mountains, rivers, and waterholes. The path of their journey became a songline, and the song they sang describes every feature along that route. This transforms the entire continent into a vast, interconnected memory palace made not of imagined rooms, but of real, tangible geography. To know the song is to be able to navigate across hundreds of miles of desert or woodland. Each verse corresponds to a specific landmark, a distinctive tree, an outcrop of rock, or a vital water source. The singer does not just recall the lyrics, they are recalling the landscape itself, using rhythm and narrative as a precise navigational tool. This system integrates multiple layers of essential knowledge into a single, performative act. Woven into the melodic sequence is practical survival data, the location of seasonal foods, the behavior of animals, and the properties of plants. But it goes far deeper. The songs also encode the law, the ethical codes governing social relationships, kinship obligations, and ceremonial practice. A single songline is a complete cultural operating manual where cosmology, navigation, ecology, and ethics are inseparable. The performance is the key to its power. Knowledge is not passively stored, it is actively recalled by walking the land while singing the song, or by singing the song to recall the land from a distance. This creates a perfect feedback loop. The landscape triggers the memory of the song, and the song describes the features of the landscape. A particular rock formation is not just a rock, it is the resting place of an ancestral being, a stanza in an epic poem that you can touch. This makes memory an embodied, multisensory experience, engaging sight, sound, movement, and a profound spiritual connection to place. For the singer, to travel the songline is to walk in the footsteps of the ancestors, continually renewing the creation of the world and reaffirming their own identity within it. The knowledge is distributed and shared across communities, with different groups holding custody of different segments of the long songlines that cross tribal boundaries, creating a network of mutual responsibility and interconnected memory. This system represents a stark contrast to the Western tradition of compartmentalizing knowledge into separate categories like geography, theology, and law. Here, all understanding is unified, contextual, and tied directly to a lived experience of the environment. It demonstrates memory engineering at its most elegant, where the external world and the internal map become one, ensuring that vital information is preserved not in fragile libraries, but in the very bones of the country and the breath of its people. This profound integration raises a challenging question for our own fragmented age. What have we forgotten by separating knowledge from the landscapes that give it meaning? The quiet scriptorium of the monastery became a laboratory for the mind's deepest architecture. As the High Middle Ages gave way to the Renaissance, a profound intellectual revival was underway, one that reached back over 1,000 years to reclaim and reimagine the classical art of memory. Ancient texts by Roman rhetoricians like Cicero and Quintilian, which had been preserved by monastic scribes, were dusted off and studied with fresh eyes. These works described the method of los, not as a curiosity, but as the essential foundation of learning and wisdom. This rediscovery sparked a transformation, turning memory from a practical tool for lawyers and orators into something far more ambitious, a mystical key to understanding the very structure of God's creation. The great theologian Thomas Aquinas became a powerful advocate for this revived art. He argued that since human understanding is rooted in sensory experience, the use of vivid, ordered mental images and places was not just acceptable for remembering scripture and theology, it was the most effective method possible. For Aquinas, building a memory palace for divine concepts was an act of pious intellectual labor, a way to construct an internal cathedral of thought that mirrored the harmony of the universe itself. This philosophical shift was monumental. Memory engineering was no longer about recalling a shopping list or a legal argument. It was a spiritual discipline, a path to enlightenment. This mystical ambition reached its peak in the Renaissance with figures like Giulio Camillo. He took the concept of the mental memory palace and made it startlingly literal. Camillo designed and built a physical memory theater, a wooden structure large enough for 1 or 2 people to stand inside. Its tiered rows were not filled with seats, but with carefully arranged images, symbols, and cabinets, each corresponding to a fundamental aspect of cosmic knowledge drawn from mythology, astrology, and Hermetic philosophy. The idea was that by standing at the center of this theater, a person could gaze upon this organized universe of symbols and, by understanding their connections, instantly comprehend the underlying order of all things. It was a bold attempt to build a machine for omniscience, a physical interface designed to unlock the divine mind. This revival reveals a crucial pivot in our story. The engineering of memory had transcended utility. It became a grand metaphysical project, a bridge between the structured, faith-based world of medieval scholasticism and the burgeoning humanist curiosity of the Renaissance that sought to map all of human and divine knowledge. The memory palace was now seen as a microcosm, a model of the cosmos that, if properly constructed within one's own mind, could lead to ultimate wisdom. This quest to build perfect internal and external models of knowledge, however, was unfolding just as a new technology began to mass-produce ideas on an unimaginable scale. The memory theater was a breathtaking concept, but it was a solitary, elite experience for a privileged few. What force would emerge to scatter these carefully ordered symbols to the winds, placing them not in a private wooden chamber, but into the hands of thousands? The luminous stained glass and the resonant chant held more than sacred stories. They held the keys to power. In a world where the past was not written but performed, control over memory was the ultimate political instrument. The bard, the priest, the law speaker, these were not just preservers of tradition, they were its authorized interpreters. Their recitation decided which ancestors were heroic and which were forgotten, which legal precedents applied, and which divine will justified a king's reign. Memory engineering, in its most potent form, was the architecture of legitimacy. Consider the vast 70-meter-long embroidery we know as the Bayeux Tapestry. It is a breathtaking feat of visual storytelling, but it is far from a neutral documentary. Commissioned by the Norman victors, it meticulously narrates the events leading to the Battle of Hastings and the crowning of William the Conqueror. Through its sequenced panels, it frames the story to present a clear, morally justified narrative of Norman right to the English throne, casting the defeated Anglo-Saxon king Harold as an oath-breaker. This was memory stitched into cloth, a portable, persuasive monument designed to be displayed in churches and halls, instructing the conquered and reassuring the conquerors of the righteousness of their new order. This selective curation was the rule, not the exception. A royal genealogist did not simply recite a list of names, they sculpted a lineage, often weaving in mythical or divine ancestors to sanctify a dynasty's claim to power. A skald in a Viking hall, dependent on the lord's patronage, would naturally emphasize his victories and generosity, while the missteps of a rival might be immortalized in verse as cowardice or folly. The community's shared memory, so often celebrated for its cohesion, could also be a tool for exclusion. To be left out of the song, the ritual, or the official king list was to be erased from the social body, to have your lineage and your rights rendered invisible. This power extended to the very landscape. When a new ruler built a cathedral over an older pagan site, or erected a monument on a battlefield, they were not just building in stone, they were overwriting the local memory with a new, authoritative narrative. They were claiming, this is what happened here, and this is what it means. The guardians of these systems held immense, fragile authority. Their knowledge was their social capital, and its careful release or strategic alteration could forge alliances, settle disputes, or condemn enemies. The struggle was not merely to remember, but to control what was remembered and in what light. This reveals a crucial, often overlooked dimension of these ancient techniques. They were never neutral archives. They were active, living instruments of social control, identity formation, and political power. The engineering of memory was, from its inception, also the engineering of consent. This understanding casts our own digital age in a stark new light, for the question persists, who holds the keys to the narrative now? A single manuscript could be lost to fire in an instant, but a story sung by 1,000 voices was far harder to silence. This reveals a profound truth about oral memory systems. Their perceived fragility was actually a sophisticated design for resilience. The common modern assumption that information passed by word of mouth must be unreliable or easily lost misunderstands the engineering entirely. These were not haphazard games of telephone. They were robust, distributed networks with built-in error checking, engineered to survive across generations in a world without backups. The core of their strength lay in redundancy and social distribution. Vital knowledge was never entrusted to a single elder or bard. It was held by many across the community, from the master storyteller to the apprentice, from the senior priestess to the chorus of women singing seasonal songs. This created a living, multi-node network. If one keeper of a genealogy passed, others held the same lineage. If a singer forgot a verse, the person next to them would remember. The community itself acted as a continuous quality control mechanism, listening for the correct formulas, the proper sequence of events, the true rhythm of the chant. Any significant deviation would be noticed and corrected by the collective memory of the audience. This distributed model meant knowledge could survive localized tragedy, migration, or conflict. The system was designed so that no single point of failure could erase the cultural archive. Furthermore, these traditions were not brittle, frozen artifacts. They were adaptive and living. While the core narrative framework, the essential plot, and the key formulaic phrases remained remarkably stable, the telling could absorb new contexts. A story about a legendary hero's journey might gain details reflecting a new landscape the people had migrated to, weaving recent experience into the ancient pattern. This flexibility was a feature, not a bug. It allowed the tradition to remain relevant and meaningful, ensuring its continued rehearsal and transmission. The sacred epic did not change, but its application to the present moment could be illuminated anew with each performance. Contrast this with the paradoxical fragility of the early written record. A single, unique manuscript containing a king's chronicle or a philosophical treatise was a treasure, but also a profound vulnerability. It sat in one place. It could be consumed by a library fire, rotted by damp, or deliberately destroyed by an invading army. The knowledge it contained died with it. the oral tradition, by spreading its data across dozens or hundreds of human minds, created a backup system that was mobile, self-repairing, and constantly being exercised. It was a technology perfectly adapted to its environment. This analysis reframes these ancient systems not as primitive precursors to writing, but as brilliant peer technologies. They were error-checking networks designed for survival through social cohesion and redundancy. Their resilience prompts an uncomfortable reflection on our own era. We have centralized our collective memory into vast digital servers and cloud archives, creating unprecedented access. But in doing so, have we recreated the vulnerability of the single, precious manuscript on a planetary scale? Our data lives in a few concentrated farms, vulnerable to solar flares, cyber attacks, or simple technological obsolescence. The ancient engineers might ask us, where is your redundancy? Where is your distributed, living network? Their methods highlight a timeless principle that the safest way to preserve a story is to make it a part of everyone. These ancient systems are not relics, they are blueprints for our own overloaded minds. The same cognitive architecture that allowed a skald to hold an epic or a monk to navigate scripture is sitting unused in our heads, waiting to be reactivated. We can become the engineers of our own memory, moving from passive consumers of information to active architects of retention. Start with the most direct application, the memory palace. You do not need a Gothic cathedral, your own home will do perfectly. Tomorrow, you need to give a short presentation. Instead of writing bullet points on a slide, take a mental walk from your front door to your kitchen. Place the first key idea, your introduction, as a vivid image on the welcome mat, perhaps a giant talking name tag. Link your second point, market data, to a storm of falling coins in the hallway. The third point, your proposal, could be a glowing model of your product sitting on the living room coffee table. When you stand to speak, simply retrace your steps in your mind, collecting these striking images. The spatial anchors will guide you through the sequence effortlessly, freeing you from notes and creating a far more natural delivery. This technique works just as powerfully for mundane tasks, transforming a grocery list into a mental scavenger hunt through your house, where a dancing loaf of bread reminds you to buy bread and a jug of milk balancing on the stairs signals dairy. For complex information from work or study, harness the timeless power of narrative. Our brains reject dry facts but cling to stories. If you are learning a new software protocol at work, do not just memorize the steps. Frame it as a hero's journey where the data packet is the protagonist leaving the safe castle of the server, facing the dragon of a firewall, receiving help from the wizard of encryption, and finally arriving at the destination. By embedding the technical sequence within a plot, you give the information context, stakes, and emotional texture, making it unforgettable, learning a new language. This is where rhythm and rhyme, the tools of the medieval poet, become your best allies. The grammatical structure of a language often has a natural cadence. Listen for it. Create silly, rhythmic rhymes for vocabulary words or verb conjugations. The melody makes the information sticky, turning a rote memorization task into a kind of mental music. Technical terms in medicine, law, or engineering can be mastered by turning them into vivid, often absurd, images based on their sounds, a method directly descended from the monastic practice of creating memorable imagines agents or active images. The profound takeaway is this: our neural hardware has not changed. The hippocampus that built Songlines still craves spatial maps. The auditory cortex that locked in Brehon laws through meter still responds to rhythm. The prefrontal cortex that wove genealogies into compelling sagas still thinks in cause and effect. We are using the same brain, just with a different set of tools. By consciously applying these ancient methods, we reclaim a form of cognitive agency. We stop seeing memory as a mysterious gift some possess and others lack, and start seeing it as a skill, a system we can design and strengthen. This is not about nostalgia for a pre-literate past. It is about integrating timeless cognitive principles into a digital present, giving us control over the flood of information we face daily. This shift from passive consumption to active, engineered retention raises a compelling question for our future. If these methods are so powerful, why are they so often absent from the very places designed to train young minds? The modern classroom, with its focus on literacy and external reference, represents a radical departure from the cognitive training of the past. We have largely abandoned the deliberate engineering of internal memory, trading the mental cathedral for the search bar. This shift prioritizes access over ownership, teaching students how to find information rather than how to hold it within. Yet, in light of ancient memory engineering, we must ask if this model has a critical blind spot. What cognitive capacities are we allowing to lie fallow when we outsource all retention to external devices? The ancient masters understood that a mind furnished with readily available knowledge, what we might call mental furniture, operates from a position of profound strength. When you do not need to pause a complex thought to look up a foundational fact, date, or formula, your creative and analytical processes can flow without interruption. This internal store allows for faster connections, more intuitive leaps, and a richer substrate for original thought. It is the difference between a chef who must run to the market for every ingredient and one who has a well-stocked pantry, enabling spontaneous and masterful creation. Consider the potential of reintroducing structured, meaningful memorization into learning, not as rote drudgery, but as a practiced art. This is not about forcing students to memorize dry lists, but about using the ancient toolkit, rhythm, narrative, and spatial memory, to internalize beautiful poetry, key historical timelines, scientific principles, or even complex procedures. Learning a sonnet through its meter and emotional arc, or mapping the sequence of a biological process onto a familiar mental walk, does more than store data. It builds cognitive muscle, enhances focus, and creates a personal, internal library of references that can be cross-referenced in an instant. This mental furniture becomes a platform for higher-order thinking. A student who carries the elegant structure of a mathematical proof or the narrative sweep of a historical period within them has a tangible framework upon which to hang new, more complex ideas. They are not starting from zero each time, they are building upon a solid, internal foundation. The most promising path forward is not a rejection of digital tools, but a conscious fusion with ancient cognitive practices. Imagine a pedagogical model where students use digital resources for research and global connection, while simultaneously training their innate memories through mnemonic techniques for core, enduring knowledge. They might create digital memory palaces using virtual reality, or use apps that teach facts through song and story-based games. This hybrid approach aims to create more robust, adaptable learners, individuals who can navigate the vast digital ocean of information without becoming lost in it, because they possess an internal compass of deeply understood, readily available knowledge. The goal is resilience, building a learner who is not helpless when the network fails, and who is intellectually agile because their mind is an active workshop, not just a passive terminal. This synthesis of the oldest and newest technologies for thought suggests a future where we are not merely consumers of information, but skilled architects of our own understanding, equipped for the uncertainties ahead with both a cloud to draw from and a well-furnished mind to think within. The smartphone in your pocket is a cathedral of a different kind, a monument to memory that we all carry. It holds our contacts, our calendars, our photographs, and instant access to the world's knowledge. In a very real sense, Google is our global bard, and the cloud is our collective, externalized mind. This is not a metaphor, it is a direct parallel to the ancient engineering we have been exploring. Just as a Gothic cathedral stored theology in its stained glass for a non-literate public, our digital devices store immense quantities of information for us, readily accessible with a tap or a spoken command. This is the modern manifestation of a timeless human impulse to build tools that extend our biological limits. Scholars call this the cognitive offloading hypothesis, the idea that we use external aids to free up mental resources. When you no longer need to memorize a phone number or a route to a new restaurant, your brain is theoretically liberated to focus on more complex tasks, like planning a project or engaging in creative thought. It is a compelling argument, one that frames our devices as the ultimate memory palaces, infinitely expandable and instantly searchable. Yet, this bargain echoes a concern voiced over 2,000 years ago. The philosopher Plato warned that writing would create forgetfulness because people would trust the external marks and stop exercising their own memory. He saw a risk of mistaking the reminder for the true knowledge held within a living mind. Today, we face a scaled-up version of that same anxiety. Are we, by offloading our phone numbers, our appointments, and even our basic factual knowledge to a device, allowing our innate capacity for recall to weaken from simple lack of practice? Research in neuroscience suggests this is a genuine possibility. The brain operates on a use it or lose it principle, where neural pathways that are not regularly exercised can become less efficient. If you never practice remembering a sequence of numbers, the cognitive muscle for that specific task may indeed atrophy. This is not about nostalgia for a pre-digital age. It is a question of conscious cognitive design. The critical issue is not whether we use technology, but how we use it. Are we engineering our digital environments to support our biological memory or to completely replace it? A tool that supports acts as a scaffold, like the notes a speaker uses to prompt a memorized speech. A tool that replaces simply does the work for us, creating a dependency where the skill itself fades. The challenge, then, is to become mindful architects of our own cognitive ecosystem. This means using technology with intention, not just by default. It might involve using a digital calendar to manage complex schedules, while still deliberately memorizing the key points of a presentation using the ancient method of loci. It could mean relying on a search engine for deep research, while also taking the time to internalize and truly understand a few core principles in your field so they become a part of your mental furniture. The goal is integration, not abdication. We have the opportunity to create a powerful hybrid mind, one that leverages the vast external storage of the digital world while maintaining a strong, agile, and well-furnished internal memory. This allows us to navigate the information age not as passive terminals constantly querying a server, but as active thinkers who can draw connections, generate insights, and create new meaning because we have a solid foundation within to build upon. The ancient engineers teach us that memory is not a passive storage bin. It is an active, dynamic system we can shape. The question for us now is, what kind of system are we choosing to build with the most powerful tools ever invented? The brilliance of these ancient memory systems carries a profound responsibility for how we engage with them today. Our journey through these cognitive landscapes must be guided by a clear ethical compass, recognizing that for many cultures, these are not historical artifacts but living, breathing traditions. The songlines of Aboriginal Australia are a perfect example. They are not simply clever navigation tools we can extract and repackage. They are sacred narratives, a spiritual and legal charter that connects people to country in an unbroken chain of custodianship. To treat such a system as merely a public domain mnemonic technique, divorcing it from its cultural context and the people who sustain it, crosses a line from admiration into appropriation. It risks turning profound cultural knowledge into a novelty, stripping it of its meaning and power. The true engineers of these systems are not anonymous figures from the past. They are the contemporary elders, knowledge keepers, and community members who have safeguarded this wisdom through immense resilience. Their role is not that of a historical source, but of an active custodian with the authority to interpret and transmit according to cultural law. Our approach, then, must shift from one of extraction to one of respectful partnership and support. This means centering the voices of these communities in any discussion of their intellectual heritage. It means acknowledging their sovereignty over their own knowledge and supporting their efforts to preserve it on their own terms, whether through language revitalization programs, land rights initiatives, or cultural education led from within. Ethical engagement also means being mindful of what we share and how. Some knowledge is meant for communal, internal transmission and is not for public broadcast. Recognizing these boundaries is a fundamental act of respect. By adopting this framework, we ensure our exploration of memory engineering becomes an act of learning rather than taking. We honor the fact that the most sophisticated memory technologies are often those that have been tended with care for thousands of years, not in a museum, but in the hearts, voices, and ceremonies of living communities. This respectful stance does not limit understanding, it deepens it, reminding us that knowledge is never just information. It is a relationship woven into identity, land, and spirit. Every monument, every chant, every carved symbol is a quiet rebellion against silence. Beneath the intricate techniques of memory engineering lies a universal human impulse far more profound than simple information storage. It is our enduring struggle to make a mark on the river of time. From the anonymous bard who first sang of Gilgamesh's quest for immortality to the medieval artisan carving a saint's likeness into cathedral stone, the drive is identical: to create something that outlasts the breath that formed it. This is not merely about practicality, it is a philosophical act, a declaration that our experiences, our loves, our struggles matter enough to be carried forward. The Viking Skald sought to freeze a king's deeds in the amber of perfect verse, ensuring his name would echo in the hall long after his body had returned to the earth. The Egyptian architect oriented a pyramid with celestial precision, anchoring a pharaoh's legacy to the eternal cycles of the stars. Even the humble tally stick, split between lender and debtor, was a pact against forgetting, a physical promise that extended trust beyond the moment. All these methods, in their beautiful variety, are different answers to the same haunting question: how do we keep what we cherish from slipping into the dark? This connects the medieval monk, meticulously building a mental palace for scripture to save his soul, directly to the modern parent carefully arranging a digital photo album to preserve a childhood. The technology changes, but the core gesture remains: an act of love and meaning-making, an attempt to curate our fragment of human experience and offer it to the future. We are, by our very nature, curators of time. We sift through the chaos of days, selecting moments, stories, and truths we deem worthy of transmission. This instinct reveals memory not as a neurological function, but as a foundational expression of consciousness itself. To be aware of the passage of time is to feel the ache of its loss, and so we build, we sing, we carve, and we save. Studying these ancient methods, then, becomes more than historical curiosity. It is a study of what it means to be human. It shows us that our fear of oblivion is matched only by our creativity in defying it. Each memory palace, each songline, each illuminated manuscript is a testament to hope, a belief that our light, however small, can be passed like a torch through the long corridor of generations. In understanding how they remembered, we ultimately discover why they, and we, remember at all. The systems themselves left no instruction manual. So how can we possibly reconstruct the intricate memory technologies of societies that never wrote them down? This is where the modern archaeologist becomes a memory detective, piecing together fragments of a cognitive puzzle scattered across landscapes and millennia. Their work is a form of intellectual forensics, reading the subtle clues embedded in stone, sound, and space to recover the blueprints of ancient thought. They begin with the silent testimony of objects. A collection of Quipu chords in a tomb is not just a burial good, it is a data set. By meticulously analyzing the patterns of knots, the sequences of colors, and the hierarchical arrangement of strands, researchers can begin to infer the logical structure the device used to encode information. It is like reverse engineering the file format of an ancient computer, deducing the operating system from the physical arrangement of its storage media. Similarly, the precise distribution of artifacts in a ceremonial space or a domestic site can reveal patterns of use and association that hint at ritual practices designed to reinforce memory through repeated, structured action. The detective work extends to the very architecture of places. Why was this stone circle built here, aligned so precisely with the sunrise on the summer solstice? This is not merely a question of astronomy, but of mnemonics. The alignment itself is a permanent, public reminder of a celestial event, a way of hard-coding the calendar into the horizon. By studying the acoustics of ancient sites, from painted caves to underground chambers, researchers have discovered that certain locations possess remarkable sound properties. The reverberations in these spaces could have transformed chants or rhythmic drumming into immersive, unforgettable experiences, using the environment itself as a resonance chamber to deepen the emotional and mnemonic impact of ritual performances. The iconography carved into temple walls or painted on pottery becomes another critical text. Repeated symbols, specific arrangements of figures, and standardized scenes are not random decorations. They are the visual vocabulary of a shared memory system. A recurring image of a particular animal paired with a celestial body might be a symbolic shorthand for a season, a myth, or a navigational star, a stable reference point in a vast oral tradition. Perhaps the most vital clue comes from living sources, the ethnographic record of contemporary oral cultures. Anthropologists studying the ways that modern communities without writing preserve knowledge through song, dance, and story provide a powerful lens for interpreting the past. By understanding how a griot in West Africa memorizes genealogies, or how Polynesian navigators use star paths and wave patterns, we gain a living model of cognitive engineering in action. These practices offer a vital analogy, suggesting how similar techniques might have functioned in ancient societies, breathing life into the silent artifacts we unearth. This forensic approach fundamentally reshapes our understanding of history. It teaches us that material culture and spatial organization are themselves complex texts, written in the language of object, place, and performance. A monument is not just a pile of stones, it is a frozen lecture. A pattern of post holes in the ground is not just a building plan, it is the footprint of a memory theater. This methodology allows us to recover the intellectual achievements of non-literate societies on their own terms, moving beyond the bias of written records to appreciate the subtlety and sophistication of their engineered solutions to the universal human problem of remembering. It proves that the absence of an alphabet is not an absence of mind, but an invitation to listen more carefully to the messages left in other forms. From the frozen halls of Viking Scalds to the sun-baked songlines of Australia, a pattern emerges across the continents. This global perspective reveals memory engineering not as a singular invention, but as a stunning case of convergent cultural evolution. Disconnected societies, from the islands of Polynesia to the forests of Europe, arrived at eerily similar solutions to the universal problem of preserving knowledge without an alphabet. The Polynesian navigator, preparing to sail across thousands of miles of open ocean, built a memory palace as vast as the Pacific itself. He did not use imagined rooms but the living world. He memorized a star compass, the precise rising and setting points of hundreds of stars. He learned to read the subtle patterns of ocean swells, feeling their direction through the hull of his canoe. He knew the flight paths of specific seabirds that signaled nearby land. This was a dynamic, multisensory memory system where celestial maps, tactile sensations, and animal behavior were woven into a single, navigable mental chart. It allowed him to traverse an empty horizon by holding an entire seascape in his mind, a feat of memory engineering that enabled the settlement of the most remote islands on Earth. Half a world away, in the scriptoriums of medieval Europe, a different but parallel technology flourished. The illuminated manuscript, like the Book of Kells, was a fusion of text and image designed for a partially literate society. The lavish, intricate illustrations were not mere decoration, they were functional memory aids. A fantastical initial letter might contain a tiny scene depicting a biblical story, serving as a visual hook for the passage it introduced. For the monk who had memorized the text, the image triggered the precise wording. For the layperson, the picture itself conveyed the narrative. This visual coding system transformed the page into a kind of two-dimensional memory palace, where information was stored in the relationship between symbolic image and sacred word. Despite their vastly different mediums, both systems relied on a shared cognitive principle, spatiality. The Polynesian navigator mapped knowledge onto the real, physical space of the ocean and sky. The European monk and the classical orator before him mapped knowledge onto the imagined space of a memory palace or the structured space of a decorated page. The Songline walker in Australia did the same, fusing narrative directly to the topography of the land. This universal turn to spatial mapping confirms a deep truth about our neural wiring. The human brain is a natural cartographer, and every culture learned to speak its language. Another powerful commonality was the creation of specialist castes, the guardians of these engineered memories. In Europe, you had the monastic scribe and the scald. In West Africa, the griot held the genealogies and histories. In ancient Celtic societies, the Druids were famously reported to undergo decades of training to memorize vast amounts of legal, historical, and spiritual knowledge. These individuals were not just talented rememberers, they were the trained technicians of their culture's cognitive software. Their long apprenticeships were essentially downloads of a massive cultural database into a single, carefully maintained biological drive. Their high social status reflected the immense value placed on this preserved knowledge, which was the very bedrock of law, identity, and survival. This global tour makes one fact inescapable. The sophisticated engineering of memory arose independently, time and again, wherever the challenge of complexity met the absence of writing. It was not a technology diffused from a single source, but a fundamental human innovation, as crucial to cultural survival as the invention of the wheel or the control of fire. Different environments demanded different tools. The ocean demanded star paths, the cathedral demanded stained glass, but the underlying impulse to build structures for thought was universal. This convergence suggests that the drive to remember profoundly is woven into the fabric of our species, a shared cognitive signature written in the varied scripts of ritual, song, and stone. Beauty was never just for admiration, it was a tool for retention. The aesthetic dimension of ancient memory systems reveals a profound insight that what we find beautiful, we remember. The intricate knotwork spiraling across a Celtic high cross, the haunting, resonant layers of a Byzantine chant filling a domed church, the perfect iambic pentameter of a Shakespearean sonnet centuries later, these were not accidental flourishes. They were deliberate cognitive enhancements, engineered to captivate the senses and thereby etch knowledge more deeply into the mind. Ancient societies did not separate utility from artistry. They understood them as two sides of the same coin, fusing the good, the true, and the beautiful into a single, unforgettable package. This is because aesthetic pleasure creates a powerful emotional hook. Our brains are wired to pay closer attention to and form stronger memories of experiences that stir us, whether through wonder, joy, or a sense of sublime awe. A plain, functional verse stating a legal principle might be forgotten, but the same principle woven into the rhythmic, alliterative tapestry of a Scaldic poem becomes an experience. The pleasure of hearing its cadence, the surprise of a clever kenning, the satisfaction of its internal rhyme, all create a multisensory memory trace that is far more durable. The melody of a Gregorian chant does more than convey a sacred text. It wraps the words in an auditory cloak of reverence and pattern, making the Latin phrases easier to recall and imbuing them with emotional weight. The staggering beauty of a cathedral facade with its ranks of saints and scenes from Scripture was a calculated strategy. It used awe as a pedagogical tool. A pilgrim gazing up at those stone figures bathed in light was not just learning a story, they were feeling it. The visual splendor triggered wonder, and wonder opens the mind, making it a more receptive vessel for the messages encoded in the art. This principle applied to the smallest objects as well. The carefully polished sheen of a ceremonial jade blade in ancient China, or the symmetrical, painted patterns on Greek pottery depicting myths. These aesthetic qualities elevated the object from a mere tool to a memory-laden artifact. The beauty commanded respect and attention, ensuring the object and the knowledge it symbolized were handled, discussed, and remembered. This fusion shows that for these cultures, knowledge was not a dry collection of facts, it was a lived experience to be felt as much as understood. The beauty of the medium was part of the message's meaning and its guarantee of survival. It illustrates a holistic vision of wisdom, where what is true must also be resonant, and what is good must also be compelling. In an age where information is often stripped bare of aesthetic form, delivered in sterile lists or minimalist interfaces, we might ask what depth of understanding we sacrifice for pure efficiency. Yet for all their resilience, these systems were not flawless archives of objective truth. The very mechanisms that made oral and monumental memory so powerful also introduced deep structural biases. A story told and retold is not a fixed recording. It is a living narrative shaped by the voices that carry it. Over generations, subtle shifts are inevitable. Details might be amplified or softened, characters elevated or diminished, often in ways that reinforce the social order of the day. The perspectives preserved were overwhelmingly those of the elite, the victorious, and the institutionally powerful. The Scald sang for his patron king, ensuring the ruler's generosity and courage were immortalized in perfect meter, while the complexities of a rival's position or the experiences of common farmers might fade from the verse. The genealogies recited by griots legitimized the ruling dynasty, tracing a luminous line back to heroic or divine ancestors, naturally sidelining other lineages. This was not necessarily malicious deception, but a function of the system's social architecture. Memory was curated by those with the status to be its guardians. This bias becomes literal, set in stone with monumental architecture. Building a pyramid, a cathedral, or a colossal statue required immense resources, labor, and centralized authority. It is no surprise, then, that these eternal memory palaces almost exclusively celebrate the worldview of those who commissioned them: pharaohs, emperors, popes, and wealthy patrons. The messages carved into their walls glorify divine right, military triumph, and orthodox doctrine. The intricate carvings on a medieval cathedral portal depict a heavenly hierarchy that mirrored and justified the feudal order on earth. The knowledge preserved in such expensive stone is inherently the knowledge that served the status quo, solidifying power by making it seem as timeless and natural as the landscape itself. What stories were not told, whose ancestors were left off the official king list, which spiritual beliefs were omitted from the stained glass? These silences are the shadow side of monumental memory, a forgetting engineered by the very act of choosing what to remember forever. Furthermore, these pre-literate systems, brilliant for narrative, law, and navigation, faced inherent challenges with other forms of knowledge. They were less agile when it came to recording vast, precise numerical data, like detailed census figures or complex astronomical calculations extending over centuries. While devices like the Quipu were remarkable, they still required a trained interpreter, and their capacity for novel, abstract philosophical argument was limited. Writing later excelled at this, allowing for the meticulous critique of a line of reasoning, the building of a complex logical proof, or the recording of a unique individual's private thoughts in a way that an epic poem meant for public performance never could. The oral tradition traded individual precision for communal stability, a bargain that served its primary purpose of cultural cohesion beautifully, but left certain intellectual avenues less traveled. Acknowledging these limitations is not to diminish the genius of ancient memory engineering, but to see it in full human dimension. It was a technology born of specific needs and shaped by the societies that used it, complete with all their hierarchies and priorities. This balanced view helps us understand the shift to writing not as a simple march of progress, but as a response to specific shortcomings, a new tool that excelled at precision, individualism, and complex abstraction, even as it introduced its own new set of trade-offs like fragility and the potential loss of deep, embodied knowing. Every technology for thought carries the fingerprints of its makers, and every solution opens new doors while quietly closing others. The trajectory of memory engineering now points inward toward the very synapses that hold our thoughts. We stand at the threshold of a new frontier, where the ancient arts of cognitive architecture may soon merge with the sciences of neural code and silicon. The development of brain-computer interfaces and advanced neuroprosthetics suggests a future not of replacing biological memory, but of augmenting it, creating a true bio-digital hybrid. Imagine a world where a complex skill, like speaking a new language or performing a surgical procedure, could be downloaded not into a device, but directly into the neural pathways that govern learning. This is no longer pure science fiction. Research is already exploring how to restore lost memories in individuals facing cognitive challenges, using implanted devices to bridge damaged circuits. The fundamental goal echoes the Scalds and the monks to preserve and transmit vital knowledge, but the method shifts from training the mind to directly upgrading its hardware. This future raises profound questions about the nature of memory itself. If a memory is implanted, is it truly ours? Does the struggle to learn, the process of building that mental cathedral through effort and repetition, impart a deeper understanding that a direct download might bypass? The ancient systems teach us that memory is not just the information stored, but the rich web of sensory, emotional, and spatial connections formed during its acquisition. The songline is not just a map, it is the experience of walking the land while singing the song. The medieval monk's memory palace was a testament to disciplined contemplation. A bio-digital future must grapple with this distinction between data and wisdom, between possessing a fact and having lived the journey to know it. Yet, the potential for human flourishing is staggering. Such technology could help overcome learning barriers, preserve the fading memories of loved ones, or allow experts to share intricate, tactile knowledge across continents in an instant. We are beginning to engineer memory not just through culture and cognition, but through biology and silicon, aiming for a seamless interface between the internal and the external. This evolution forces us to ask what kind of memory architects we want to become. Will we design these tools to expand human potential and preserve the depth of lived experience, or will we prioritize mere efficiency, creating a society of flawless recall but shallow understanding? The history we have walked through offers a crucial lens, It shows us that every memory technology, from the epic poem to the printed book, changed not only what we could remember, but how we thought and who we were. The coming fusion of mind and machine will be no different. It invites us to proceed with the wisdom of the ancient engineers, remembering that the ultimate purpose of any memory system is not just to store information, but to enrich the human story it exists to tell. Think of the front door of your own home. This is where your personal memory palace begins, not as a historical concept, but as a living space inside your mind. Take a moment right now and choose a path you know by heart, the walk from your bedroom to the kitchen or your daily route to work. Now, select 3 things you absolutely must remember to do tomorrow. Perhaps it is a phone call you need to make, a bill you have to pay, and an important email you must send. Do not just list them. We are going to engineer them into your landscape. For the phone call, picture your phone ringing loudly, but instead of a handset, it is a giant singing sunflower sitting in your favorite armchair. For the bill, imagine your kitchen sink overflowing not with water, but with a cascade of envelopes and coins, the sound of it impossible to ignore. For that crucial email, see your computer keyboard floating in the hallway, its keys made of tiny, chattering envelopes, each one typing out the message on its own. Take a mental walk now from your starting point and place each of these absurd, vivid images at a specific spot along your familiar path. Do not worry about getting it perfect. The goal is to feel the mechanism engage, to experience how a silly, sensory detail creates a hook that your mind cannot easily shake loose. This simple exercise is a direct line back to the Scalds and the monks. You are using the same cognitive wiring they did, proving that the capacity to build these structures is not a lost art, but a dormant skill. It is a muscle we have simply forgotten to exercise in an age of digital reminders. By taking just 30 seconds to try this, you have transformed an ancient engineering principle from a fascinating story into a tangible, personal tool. You have moved from learning about memory to actively designing it. This shift from passive listener to active architect is the most vital legacy of these ancient systems. They remind us that our own minds are the most profound technology we will ever possess, waiting only for our intention to bring their oldest, most powerful functions back to life. The echoes of those ancient voices leave us with a profound realization. Our journey through the engineered memories of pre-literate societies reveals a stunning truth. Long before silicon chips, humanity built vast and resilient knowledge networks using the raw materials of mind, body, voice, and stone. From the rhythmic sagas of Viking Scalds to the sacred Songlines traversing Australia, these were not primitive workarounds for a lack of writing. They were sophisticated cognitive technologies, carefully designed systems that shaped laws, guided navigation, and forged the very identity of civilizations. They prove that the greatest library our species has ever known was not built of parchment, but of patterned thought. As we stand now in our own age of constant information overload and profound digital dependence, these ancient practices offer us more than historical insight. They offer a crucial mirror. They reflect back at us urgent questions about our own relationship with knowledge. What do we choose to remember when we no longer have to remember anything at all? How do we choose to remember it when the process is so often passive, a quick search instead of a deep, architectural construction within our own minds? And most importantly, who do we become in that process? The ancient engineers teach us that memory is not a storage function. It is an act of meaning. The effort to build a mental palace, to learn a song that maps a continent, or to chant a lineage that connects you to the past, that effort itself transforms information into wisdom, into a part of who you are. When we outsource that effort completely, we risk becoming curators of a museum we have never fully visited, holding keys to archives we have not built. The call to action here is not to abandon our tools, but to use them with the wisdom of those who came before. It is a call to become conscious architects once more, not of stone monuments, but of our own cognitive landscapes and our shared cultural legacy. We can design our learning, our teaching, and our record-keeping to include both the incredible power of external storage and the irreplaceable depth of internal mastery. Let us carry forward from this exploration not just admiration for their ingenuity, but a renewed commitment to that balance. If you found this deep dive into humanity's cognitive heritage fascinating, consider subscribing for more journeys into history's hidden technologies. And we would love to hear from you in the comments. What is one story, one song, or one family ritual from your own life or culture that has been preserved without ever being written down? Your personal piece of this ancient, ongoing story is a vital part of the record.